The classroom was silent, save for the dull hum of advanced technology and the low mutter of alien students. Olivia Smith sat at the back of the room, flipping through her textbook without a care in the world. Around her, a dozen aliens, each taller, stronger, and far more advanced than any human, sat like a menacing council, their eyes flicking to her every few seconds. She barely noticed. Her mind was focused on the algebraic equations in front of her, her hands flipping through the pages without so much as a glance at the stairs. The atmosphere in the room thickened the moment Zilax, the classroom's self-appointed leader, stood. The silence broke, and all eyes followed his massive form. He was twice the size of any of his peers, his muscles rippling with what could only be described as arrogant power. His forearms flexed as he cracked his knuckles, eyes narrowing in on Olivia with an intensity that should have made her blood run cold. The alien was a brute, all jagged features and sharp teeth, his very presence suffocating the air, but Olivia didn't even flinch. "Hey, Earthling," Zilax growled, his voice deep and resonant. "Do you feel that?" He extended a clawed finger, pointing directly at her. "This is my class, my territory. You don't belong here." According to YouTube analytics, 98% of viewers are not subscribed. That's a huge number. By subscribing the channel that is completely free, Olivia didn't respond, her fingers still tracing a formula on the page, her eyes moving from the book to the front of the classroom. She caught a glimpse of Zilax's thick tail whipping behind him, signaling the start of his usual theatrics. "You're supposed to be scared of me," Zilax continued, his voice rising, reverberating against the walls. "But you're just sitting there like an insect, pretending nothing's happening. Is that how you humans deal with things? By hiding under your tiny little rocks?" A collective murmur passed through the other alien students, some exchanging knowing glances, others looking at Olivia with contempt. They didn't understand why she wasn't reacting. This was supposed to be the moment where humans cowered, where they shrank in fear. But Olivia wasn't moving, not even a hint of nervousness on her face. Olivia finally raised an eyebrow, her voice as casual as if she were discussing the weather. "Is this your way of introducing yourself?" "Because I gotta be honest, it's pretty cliché." Zilax's growl rumbled through the room. He took a step forward, his enormous form towering over Olivia. "You're pushing it, human. I'm the leader here. You don't even get to look at me unless I say so." A few of the students seemed to edge away, sensing the impending escalation, but none dared to speak. Olivia's indifference was only making Zilax angrier, which, in turn, seemed to provoke his peers into quiet anticipation. "What's the matter, Zilax? Afraid you might lose to someone smaller than you?" Olivia asked, her voice dripping with sarcasm. The alien's face twisted in rage, his eyes flaring with malice. He slammed his fist into the desk next to Olivia's, making the entire table shake. "You think you're above me? Fine," Zilax sneered. "If you're not afraid of me, then prove it." He turned toward the rest of the class, his voice thundering. "I challenge Olivia Smith to a duel. We'll see if she's as strong as her human pride makes her out to be." A shiver ran through the room. Duel challenges were common at this prestigious interspecies academy, but never had one been issued so casually, so recklessly. Zilax was a force to be reckoned with, and duels between students were not only sanctioned, they were expected. It was a tradition to establish dominance, but this time the stakes were far higher. This was a human, in a prestigious alien school where humanity was barely tolerated. To challenge one like this was a clear display of not just personal pride, but an open defiance of the established hierarchy. "Zilax, please," the teacher, Vexia, interjected, stepping forward in a vain attempt to restore order. Vexia was a respected educator, but her species wasn't known for its physical prowess. In a situation like this, she was entirely out of her depth. "It's fine," Olivia interrupted, her voice cool and unbothered. "If he wants to fight, we'll fight." "But he should probably know," she paused, leaning back in her chair. "Humans don't lose easily." The other students began murmuring, their disbelief and fascination mixing in the air. Some were excited by the challenge, others, including Vexia, were horrified by the potential destruction this could cause in the class. They had all witnessed Zilax dominate everyone else in the past. How could a mere human stand a chance? Zilax grinned like a predator who had cornered his prey. We'll see about that. Class, you're all witnesses. If she survives, I'll give her whatever she wants, but if she loses, well, let's just say she'll regret it. There was no turning back now. The challenge was set, and while the room hummed with nervous energy, one student sat unaffected. Olivia Smith, human exchange student from Earth, was about to prove to everyone what happens when you underestimate a human. Zilax moved to the center of the room, fists clenched. Prepare yourself, Earthling. Olivia slowly stood from her seat, dusting off her pants as she turned to face him. Her calmness seemed to mock the very idea of intimidation. Zilax expected her to hesitate, to show fear. He'd never had a fight go wrong before. But this was not just another fight. The stakes were much higher than either of them realized. Zilax's patience was wearing thin. His claws twitched with frustration as Olivia stood there, utterly unaffected. He had expected to see fear, genuine, knee-shaking terror, and instead, there she was, as casual as if they were discussing the weather. Her eyes were half-lidded, completely uninterested in the escalating tension in the room. "You know," Zilax growled, his voice seething with fury, "you're really starting to piss me off." Olivia didn't respond, not even a flicker of emotion crossing her face. She just crossed her arms and looked up at him with that same disinterested look. "Oh, really? I didn't know you were so sensitive. How cute." The other students shifted uncomfortably in their seats. They had all seen Zilax challenge others before. He was always the one in control, always the one who won. The way he loomed over the humans, towering like a mountain of pure muscle, should have been enough to make anyone tremble. And yet here was Olivia, a small, unremarkable human girl, completely ignoring the warning signs that screamed she was about to be flattened into the ground. Zilax's lips curled back in a snarl, revealing his jagged teeth. "You're not going to make it out of here in one piece if you keep this up." He took a step forward, his boots thudding heavily against the floor. The room felt like it was closing in, the weight of expectation pressing against Olivia. She still didn't react. Her posture was that of someone waiting for the bus, not for an intergalactic brawl. Zilax leaned down, his breath hot and rancid against Olivia's face. "Don't you get it? You're on my turf now, and I decide who stays and who goes." Olivia finally raised an eyebrow, almost bored. "Then you should have brought a better weapon than that ego of yours." The room fell dead silent, every alien in the class staring at Olivia as if she had just dropped a bomb in the middle of their planet. Zilax, still towering over her, looked like he might snap in half from sheer rage. His eyes burned with an intensity that made the temperature in the room feel a few degrees hotter. "You think you're funny?" he snarled, his voice low and dangerous. "I'll show you what happens when you mess with me." Without warning, Zilax lunged forward, his fists flying toward Olivia with lightning speed. His arms were heavy with the force of a dozen punches, the kind of strikes that could turn a lesser species into a pile of mush. It was clear. He meant to end this now. But Olivia didn't flinch, not even a millimeter. In one smooth, almost lazy motion, Olivia sidestepped to the left, her movement so fluid it was like she had all the time in the world. Zilax's punch sailed past her, crashing into the desk behind her with enough force to split it in half. Wood splintered across the floor in a spray of jagged fragments. Zilax's eyes went wide with disbelief. He spun, roaring in frustration. "You're supposed to be weak! You're just a human! You can't move like that!" But Olivia wasn't even watching him now. She was casually dusting off her pants, as if the destruction of a desk was the most unremarkable thing in the universe. Her voice was calm, almost amused, as she glanced over her shoulder at him. "Maybe I've just been hiding it all this time. How embarrassing for you." Zilax's rage reached its boiling point. The other students in the room began to murmur, exchanging glances. Some of them shifted in their seats, trying to make sense of what was happening. Humans were supposed to be fragile. Humans were supposed to be weak. This couldn't be happening. Zilax was supposed to dominate. Zilax was losing control, his pride beginning to crack. He turned and lunged again, this time his hands reaching for Olivia's throat, intent on squeezing the life out of her with his raw strength. He was going to crush her, make her understand that no matter how much she resisted, she was nothing against his power. But Olivia was ready. In a blur, she moved again, her hand reaching out to meet his massive wrist before he even got close. The moment her fingers made contact, Zilax's eyes widened in shock. She had caught him, a human, a tiny human, with no visible effort, no strain in her movements. It wasn't possible. Her grip tightened, and the moment she shifted her weight, her body twisting into a fluid motion, she twisted his arm, just enough to make him stagger backward. Zilax let out a strangled growl as the sudden pressure on his arm sent a shock of pain through him. He tried to jerk his arm free, but Olivia held fast, her grip unyielding. "Whoa! Whoa! What the hell?" Zilax grunted, trying to pull away, but he couldn't. His entire body, all of his strength, was being overpowered by this small human girl who was hardly even trying. There was no time to react. The class went dead quiet as the realization hit them. Olivia's arm was holding Zilax's with a firm, controlled grip, her expression utterly blank, as if she were bored by the spectacle of it all. The students watched, stunned, as Olivia effortlessly pushed Zilax's arm to the side, tossing him away like a rag doll. His heavy form crashed to the ground with a thud that reverberated throughout the room. For a moment, no one moved. The entire class was frozen in a mixture of awe and terror. This wasn't supposed to happen. Humans were supposed to be weak, the weakest species, the ones who needed protection from the might of others. They were never supposed to turn the tables. Zilax, his chest heaving with anger, scrambled to his feet, his pride shattered. His claws flexed as he glared at Olivia, his mouth twisted in disbelief. You filthy human!" Olivia didn't even look at him. She straightened her jacket, unfazed. "Come on, big guy, I'm getting bored. Do you want to try again, or are you going to call it?" The other students looked between each other, eyes wide. Some of them began to whisper, soft, stunned murmurs about the impossibility of what they had just witnessed. The balance of power, the entire foundation of everything they had been taught about humans, was crumbling in front of them. Zilax, the supposedly unstoppable bully, had just been humiliated by a human. The room had shattered. Everything these students had thought they knew about strength, about who deserved to rule and who didn't, was now in question. Zilax growled again, his anger reaching a fever pitch, but there was something else in his eyes. Fear. And that fear was spreading through the room. Slowly, one by one, the students began to wonder if the legends they had been taught about humanity had been wrong all along. Maybe it wasn't just a fluke. Maybe Olivia Smith wasn't just a weak human at all. The room hummed with an electric tension, the silence deafening in its intensity. Zilax, still seething with rage, stood facing Olivia, his fists clenched, his entire body trembling with the weight of his humiliation. He had never been brought to this point before, not by anyone, and especially not by a human. He lunged at her again, but Olivia barely reacted, sidestepping him like a dancer avoiding an ill-timed partner. This time, her gaze never left him, calm, almost pitying, as if she were watching some sort of pathetic show. She wasn't even breaking a sweat. Every move she made was deliberate, controlled, as if she had been doing this her whole life. The other students watched in stunned silence. No one had ever seen a human behave this way, unflinching, unafraid, completely at ease, even as Zilax's rage tore through the classroom like a storm. But now, a new presence entered the scene. The door slid open, and a tall, poised figure stepped inside the room. Kael'thas, the school's senior authority figure, entered with an air of calculated calm. His alien physiology was unlike anything the humans in the class had encountered before. Tall and sleek, with glowing purple skin and 3 sets of eyes, he was a figure of control and intellect. As one of the highest-ranking members of the academy, Kael'thas had witnessed humans in his school before, but never one like this. He had always believed the old adage, humans are fragile, easily intimidated. He expected Olivia to crumble just like the others before her, but something had gone terribly wrong. Kael'thas raised an eyebrow as he looked between Olivia and Zilax. His voice was low, almost soothing, as he addressed the room. "Zilax," he said, his tone a mixture of disappointment and authority. "That will be enough." Zilax didn't stop. He gritted his teeth and swung again, his fists aimed squarely at Olivia's face. This time, Olivia didn't even bother to move, merely raising her hand as though inviting the strike. The alien's blow landed, but it didn't land the way it should have. Olivia's hand caught his fist again, her fingers closing around it with an ease that sent a shockwave through the class. Zilax snarled, trying to force his strength into her hand, but she didn't budge. She didn't even seem to feel the force he was putting into it. It was as if she were holding back a mere child, not a fully grown alien predator. Kael'thas's expression darkened. "Zilax, stop this at once," he ordered again, his voice stern but still calm. But Zilax, caught in his rage, ignored him entirely. The frustration was palpable, his strikes now becoming more desperate, his movements erratic. His pride was on the line, and he couldn't bear to lose to this human. Olivia, still holding his fist, turned her head ever so slightly to Kael'thas, then back to Zilax. "I'll tell you what," she said casually. "If he doesn't calm down, I might actually have to break his arm next." Her voice was as flat as ever, as though she were talking about the weather, not about breaking a combat-trained alien's limb in front of a class of peers. Kael'thas froze. The nonchalance in Olivia's tone, the casual threat, it completely threw him off. This wasn't how humans were supposed to act. They were supposed to be fragile, to be intimidated, to be scared. It was how every human he had met before had behaved. But here she was, a human, completely unfazed and openly dismissive of Zilax's strength. Kael'thas's 3 sets of eyes narrowed, analyzing the situation with a sharpness that would have made any other species tremble. This wasn't an isolated incident. He had seen humans in diplomatic settings, in controlled environments where their fragility was almost a given. Their emotional responses were often erratic, and their physical capabilities were universally inferior. Yet somehow Olivia was defying every expectation and every law of logic. "What exactly is going on here?" Kael'thas muttered, his voice barely audible. He had seen human resilience before, but this was something else, something new. Zilax, seeing that his intimidation tactics were completely failing, made a move in desperation. He stepped forward again, a heavy punch aimed directly for Olivia's chest. He was certain this would be the blow that crushed her. But once again, she didn't even flinch. Instead, she stepped inside his reach, almost effortlessly. And with a quick twist of her hips, she brought her knee up into his midsection, knocking the wind out of him. The class collectively gasped. Zilax staggered back, clutching his stomach, the fight draining from his eyes. He had underestimated her in every possible way. His body trembled not with exertion, but with a primal realization. He had just been bested by a human. "Did you really think I'd just sit there and let you hit me?" Olivia asked, her voice almost bored. "We're kind of used to worse on Earth." She shrugged as if this entire exchange were a mild inconvenience to her. Kael'thas blinked, the confusion now deepening. His mind raced, processing everything that had just occurred. His memories of dealing with humans during diplomatic meetings came flooding back. He had assumed their cultural weakness was inherent, that their frailty was physical and psychological. Yet, here in front of him was evidence that everything he thought he knew about humans, about their limitations, had just been shattered. Kael'thas glanced at the other students whose eyes were wide with shock. They had seen the might of Zilax, seen him crush countless opponents in duels before. But this was something different. The human wasn't just holding her ground. She was turning the fight against Zilax, almost playing with him. "What is this?" Kael'thas murmured under his breath. How can this be?" Zilax, now gasping for breath, growled in frustration. He had no words left, no more boasts, no more threats. He was out of options, but he wasn't ready to admit defeat, not in front of his peers, not in front of her. Kael'thas could see the shift in the room. Students were beginning to doubt themselves, their assumptions about what was possible. They had witnessed something impossible, Zilax, the powerful alien bully, was now on the defensive, and it wasn't because he lacked strength. It was because he had underestimated a human. Kael'thas turned to Olivia, his voice suddenly sharp, commanding. "Human," he said, his tone now formal. "Explain yourself. How are you capable of this?" Olivia, with an expression as calm as ever, took a deep breath, folding her arms. "I told you, I grew up on Earth. We've had to deal with a lot worse than a bully throwing punches." Her voice was almost amused, like she were speaking to a child asking a dumb question. The classroom was still, utterly still, as Olivia's words sank in. It wasn't just physical strength that had allowed her to survive. It was a different kind of resilience, a mental toughness that they had never imagined humans capable of. It wasn't about fighting back. It was about knowing when to fight and when to wait. Kael'thas didn't know how to respond. His world was collapsing around him. All the rules, all the protocols that had guided his understanding of the galaxy had just been broken by a single human. Zilax, still on the floor, finally spoke, his voice shaking. "What do we do now?" Olivia looked down at him, unfazed, before casually walking back to her desk, sitting down and resuming her work. "Well, now that we've got that out of the way, anyone else got questions?" The room was silent for a long moment. Kael'thas could only watch as the realization of what had just happened set in. Everything he had believed about humanity, about its place in the galaxy, was wrong. The implications were staggering. This wasn't just about Zilax losing to a human. This was about everything they had known about humans being completely, irreparably false. And there was no turning back now. The room was thick with tension. For a moment, everything seemed to hold its breath. Zilax was trembling with fury, his massive form a hulking shadow looming over Olivia. The class had already watched as Zilax's usual intimidating moves had been rendered useless by the calm, unflinching human girl. But this time, the alien wasn't going to back down. A low growl rumbled in Zilax's chest as he straightened up, his body taut and coiled like a predator about to pounce. His eyes locked onto Olivia, filled with an unbridled rage that threatened to tear the room apart. The humiliation of the past few minutes was too much. He was done playing games. He was going to finish this one way or another. "You really don't get it, do you?" Zilax spat, his voice thick with contempt. "You think you're invincible? You think you can walk all over me? Well, let's see how tough you really are." Before anyone could blink, Zilax charged forward, his fists swinging wildly, his entire body crashing toward Olivia with the force of a stampede. He moved faster than anyone in the room had anticipated, his claws outstretched, aiming directly for her neck. It was a move designed to overwhelm, to smash through any last vestige of human resistance. Zilax's strikes were brutal and fast, but there was one thing he didn't account for. Olivia wasn't afraid. She wasn't fighting back. She was simply waiting. Olivia didn't flinch as Zilax hurtled toward her. She didn't duck. She didn't move. She didn't even look afraid. Instead, she raised her hand, her fingers moving with a speed that shocked even Kael'thas, who had seen hundreds of duels in his time. In one fluid motion, Olivia caught Zilax's arm mid-swing, just like before, but this time she didn't twist it away. With an eerie calm, she stepped closer to Zilax. His eyes widened in confusion, and before he could process what was happening, Olivia grabbed the back of his neck with both hands, her fingers digging into his thick skin with a precision that made the other students cringe. Then, in one swift motion, she twisted. There was a sickening crack. Zilax's body went limp. His massive form crumpled to the floor with a loud thud, the force of his fall shaking the very foundation of the classroom. The entire room seemed to freeze as his body lay motionless on the ground. For a long moment, no one moved, no one spoke. The only sound was the soft hum of the ventilation system filling the eerie void of silence. Olivia stood over him, her expression still completely neutral. The same calm, almost bored demeanor that had infuriated Zilax was still there. She wiped her hands off on her pants, looking down at his lifeless form with the same indifference she might show after brushing off some dirt. "Next time," she said coolly, her voice almost casual, Try asking me nicely." The words hung in the air, as heavy as the body on the floor. The students, the teacher, and even Kael'thas stood in stunned silence. Zelax, the powerful, arrogant bully, who had ruled the room with fear and intimidation, was now just a heap of flesh, an unfortunate victim of the very violence he had inflicted on others so many times. But it wasn't just his defeat that left the room reeling. It was the way it had happened. One simple, effortless motion, Olivia had torn down the walls of the entire alien worldview. No one had ever seen a human do something like this before. To them, humans were weak. Their physical abilities were nothing compared to the advanced species of the galaxy. And yet, here was a human, this human, breaking the most basic laws of their understanding of power and dominance. Kael'thas stared at Olivia, his 3 sets of eyes wide, his mind racing. The ground beneath him seemed to shift as he processed what had just transpired. In all his years of commanding and analyzing the behavior of countless species, Kael'thas had never considered that a human might possess the sheer strength and calm to break an alien's neck with such ease. He had assumed humans were limited by their biology, their emotional volatility, their fragile physiques. He had never considered that their true power lay not in their strength, but in their resilience, their ability to endure, to face fear head-on, and to act when every instinct should have told them to flee. His mind began to fracture. His previous assumptions about humans, about the entire species, were wrong. Everything he had believed about strength, dominance, and respect had just been turned on its head. Zelax, the embodiment of physical power and authority in this class, was now defeated by a human. And there was no denying it. Olivia's victory was absolute. It wasn't just about her physical strength. It was about the quiet, unshakable confidence she exuded in the face of a world that had written her kind off as insignificant. The alien students looked at each other, their confusion palpable. Some of them were still frozen in place, unable to process what they had just seen. Others looked at Olivia with a mix of awe, fear, and something else, something that might have been the first seeds of respect. Kael'thas cleared his throat, his voice strained as he tried to regain his composure. This is unprecedented," he muttered to himself, though loud enough for the class to hear. His gaze shifted from Zelax's lifeless body to Olivia, who was already sitting back down, resuming her work as if nothing had happened. The realization was slow to settle in, but it hit Kael'thas like a thunderclap. Humans had always been underestimated, always regarded as the weak species, the ones who could be pushed around. But this, what Olivia had just done, was proof that they were more than anyone had ever given them credit for. They weren't just survivors. They were resilient in ways Kael'thas had never considered. Zelax's bullying, his very role in this classroom, had collapsed. Olivia, in a single act, had shattered not only his reign of terror, but the entire societal framework that upheld it. As Olivia sat back down, she glanced up at Kael'thas, her voice as casual as ever. "You know, this school's kind of lacking in real challenges, huh?" Kael'thas stared at her for a moment. Longer, his thoughts churning. The rules had changed, the power dynamics had shifted, and there was no going back to the way things were. Zelax's defeat wasn't just his own loss, it was the loss of the entire belief system that had supported alien superiority over humans. Olivia had, with one simple act of defiance, toppled that belief. She had made the aliens realize that their strength meant nothing if they could be beaten by someone who didn't even care about it. It was the beginning of something new. As Kael'thas took a deep breath, he addressed the class, his voice now quieter, more contemplative. This changes everything. We must reassess how we view humans in our society, and how we treat them. Olivia looked up from her desk, her tone dry as ever. "Oh, please, no need to make a big deal of it. It's just a Tuesday on Earth." And with that, the class fell into a stunned silence. The world of aliens forever changed by one human who had dared to be more than they ever expected. The classroom was still, the only sound the faint hum of the ventilation system, which seemed almost too loud now. Zilax's body had been removed, and the students, still recovering from the shock of Olivia's actions, turned their attention to Kael'thas. Kael'thas stood at the front of the class, his usual calm and composure gone. He surveyed the room, his 3 sets of eyes wide, unsettled. The entire paradigm of what he understood about power and strength had just been shattered by a human, a species he had always viewed as fragile and inconsequential. His mind whirled with the implications of what had just happened. How could this be? How had Olivia, this human, defeated Zilax with such ease? His voice, once authoritative and unquestionable, now held an edge of uncertainty as he addressed Olivia, his tone softer than usual. "Human," he began, his words carefully measured. I need to understand. What exactly was that? What was your method? How were you able to do what you just did?" Olivia, who had returned to her seat with the same nonchalance she had shown throughout the entire event, glanced up at Kael'thas. Her expression was casual, almost bored, as if the spectacle of moments earlier had been no more than a fleeting inconvenience. She leaned back in her chair, her arms folded. "Sometimes," Olivia said with a small shrug, "people need to know when to stop." Kael'thas blinked, processing her words, but they didn't quite land the way he expected. The simplicity of her response, so devoid of any pretense or complexity, only deepened his confusion. It was as if Olivia wasn't speaking from a place of strategy or power, but from something entirely different, something far more primal, something that had never occurred to Kael'thas in his years of overseeing interspecies relations. The other students, who had once dismissed Olivia as a mere human, now watched her with a mixture of awe, fear, and growing respect. They had witnessed her effortlessly dismantle Zilax, the strongest of them all. The strong, the powerful, and the arrogant were no longer the ones to fear. It was the quiet, unassuming ones, like Olivia, who were now a force to be reckoned with. Kael'thas took another step forward, his voice now edged with something closer to reverence. "It seems," he said carefully, "that we have all been mistaken. We have misjudged humanity. What we considered weakness, your fragility, your emotional volatility, may in fact be something else entirely. Your resilience, your capacity for patience, may be far greater than we have realized." Olivia didn't respond right away. Instead, she glanced down at her homework, absent-mindedly picking up her pen and jotting down a few notes. The stillness in the room deepened. For a moment, Kael'thas and the students waited for her to say something profound, something that would explain the impossible, but Olivia just seemed indifferent. "Can we go back to class now?" she asked, her voice dry as she scribbled a few more notes. "I've got homework to do, and this whole thing is really messing with my schedule." The room was struck dumb by her casualness. Kael'thas opened his mouth to speak, but the words didn't come. Olivia had just shattered the very fabric of their understanding of humans, of strength, and of interspecies dynamics, and yet she didn't even seem to care. The class was no longer about alien superiority. It was no longer about the established hierarchy that placed humans at the bottom of the food chain. Olivia had proven that humans weren't just another weak species to be trodden upon. They were capable of unimaginable resilience, something that couldn't be measured by raw strength or technology. Kael'thas felt the weight of that truth settle on him. A new paradigm was being born, one in which humanity was no longer the underdog, no longer the little species that could be overlooked or disregarded. What Olivia had done, so effortlessly, had opened the door to an entirely new way of thinking. Outside the classroom, beyond the walls of this interspecies academy, the galaxy would soon be forced to grapple with the implications of her actions. The senior officials of the Galactic Council would debate the place of humanity in this vast cosmos. For the first time, the idea of humans being considered inferior would be questioned, and it was all because of one human girl who had simply known when to stop. As Kael'thas turned to address the class again, his voice was quieter, tinged with the weight of understanding. "We have much to learn," he said, his tone now acknowledging the truth that had just been revealed. "The humans we have encountered, they are not what we believed them to be. Their strength is not in their power alone. It is in their ability to endure, to outlast. We will need to reconsider everything we know about them. Olivia finally looked up from her homework, giving Kael'thas a small smile that was entirely free of pretense. "Yeah, good luck with that," she said, leaning back in her chair. "I'll be here when you figure it out. I've got a lot of homework to catch up on." The other students exchanged glances. Some were still processing what had just happened, but a few of them gave Olivia a new look, one of genuine respect. And as Olivia returned to her homework, her quiet confidence settling over the room like a blanket, the galaxy began to change. It wouldn't happen overnight, but the seeds of a new reality were now planted. One where humans were no longer the weak, fragile species to be looked down upon. They were the ones who would shape the future, and the aliens would have to learn to deal with that.